So now let's update the client application so that this data of product category endpoint is being fetched and displayed at the client. Let's go to the client side coding now. I'll open the SRC and inside the Redux, I'll go to actions in which I have product, which contains the data. As you see this data here, this data now we don't want here, but this data should be from the MySQL database. So that's the next step we are going to do. So now here is the place where we need to call the API. Now to make an API call, we need the Axios library. You can certainly use the AJAX call using the XML HTTP request. You also have fetch API which can be used. Here we are using the Axios library, so I'm going to add that. I'll say yarn add Axios. Now this is installed, so I'm going to import the Axios in the beginning. I'll say import Axios from Axios. Now I'm going to make a GET request. The method will be GET and the URL is the API endpoint which we have defined in the previous section. So here is the URL which I'm copying and pasting here. I'll just display the data directly for initial checking. Now let's run the React application. I'll say localhost 3000. Now here is the application. Now we have displayed the data in the console. So let's check the console here in the developer tool. So now let's make the request. And you see that there are few errors. There is one error in fact, and that is about CORS, the CORS, that is the cross origin resource sharing. Now for this, we need to make few changes in the API. So we'll go to the server side code and we are going to enable the CORS in the index.js. So at the server level, we are going to enable the CORS. This error actually comes when you have a request to the server from other domain or even sometimes through other port. Like right now, here there is no issue, but when you run in the React application, which is actually a different port here. So when you make a request to the other server, which is running on 5000, then it will not allow. So on the server, we have to set a setting which says that the CORS is enabled. That means one can make a request from cross origin. And for that, we have already installed a CORS package. So that I'm going to enable here. So I'll say const CORS is equal to require CORS. And it's a middleware. So I will make a call using app.use. Now let's rerun the server to make sure that the changes are executed. Let me also tell you that instead of typing node every time, you can use the nodemon, right, which we will see as the application progresses. Nodemon is something which will implement a kind of hot reloading. So let's go to React application now and let's make a request to the API endpoint. And now let's check that we have the response from API. The data is displayed now here. And if I just expand this, you see that the data we added in the MySQL is now available in our React application. Now this data we will be displaying. So we'll remove the constant data we defined and we'll update the data from the MySQL. So now let's go to the client application code. Now here we are making the GET request. So the data we have displayed using the console log statement. This we need to update to the respective variables which we have here. So we have product categories in which we have this fixed data. So now we are trying to display the data, that is retrieved data, as it is, and then we'll try to format it in a more appropriate way. So I'm going to take a temporary category array. And now we are going to put a loop. So we have the data inside the response that we are going to loop through. And now we are going to replicate this structure which we have here. Now I'm assigning the respective data. Now here I have kept the subcategory empty, which we will fine tune later on. So we just try to display the direct data we have here. So this array is updated with new items. And now in dispatch, we are passing the temp category data. Here you don't see any data at the moment in the category section. The reason is the Axios, when it is making call, it is an asynchronous call. And for the loop to display the data, first of all, we'll have to make that call as a pure asynchronous using the await statement. So here I'm going to add await now. Let's save this and go back to the output. And now you see that the kids' dresses or jackets, all those data, all those pieces which were entered in MySQL are now getting displayed here. Now let's try to bring the data in proper category and subcategory. Now we are going to fetch all the parent category first. All the parent categories will have null as that parent category ID, and those we will compare in the same table. So let's use the filter method. So now we'll have the all parent category data here in the parent cat array. Now we are going to loop through that array. Now this should fetch the subcategory into the subcategory key. Now let's see the output. And here you see that now we have the subcategories fetched properly. So the method which I have just used, it is a very simple one. It is all about looping through the proper array and fetching the respective data by comparing it. So I hope that is easy to understand. Certainly you can put a comment if you need more clarification on these things. You can certainly check my JavaScript tutorial to know more about map and filter methods. So you'll get the idea how these things happen. So this is how we fetch the data from the server. In the MySQL, we entered the data in previous session that we have fetched in our React application using the Axios library. Now let's try to add few values in the MySQL table just to see it's working fine or not. So let's add few records here. So now I'm adding one subcategory. Let's also add few main categories, at least one or two. I'm going to say accessories. Now the accessories ID is 5. So that's the parent category for other records. That is the subcategory. So let's say watches is the subcategory of accessory. So I'll say 5 here. And let's add necklace. Also 5. So now we have total 7 records. Out of 7, there are 2 main categories. Now let's go to the React application and just refresh to see whether we have the proper data or not. And here we have it. So more or less now I hope you are clear with some structure of making the request, also creating the server. So now we have seen the categories section working fine, that is the sidebar. Now we are going to work with this section. We need to make dynamic. So the image is the data which we have here that we are going to make dynamic.